Back to Breeders' Cup with the DRF app. The Daily Racing Form app is a highly rated, powerful tool that makes handicapping and wagering fast and easy, putting you in position to win big at the races. Register today to double your first deposit up to $250. Get the DRF app now.
Hi everyone, David Aragona here with Craig Milkowski, and we are taking a look at one of the many Breeders' Cup races on Saturday's card at Del Mar. This is Race 9, the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile. And Craig, this is among the most wide open races on this Breeders' Cup Saturday card. We'll throw up the field for this race. You can see one of the European contenders, Space Blues, is pegged as the morning line favorite at 3-1, but there are many ways to go in this race.
There is. I mean, this is always one of the tougher races on the card. We always get a good mix of American horses and Euro horses. Yet another good Breeders' Cup race, and I think it's a really good betting race. So lots of ways you can go, and I do think there's some money to be made.
This field is capped at 14, so there are currently 2 stuck on the also eligible list. Both of them would need 1 or 2 scratches to draw into this race. But as you were getting at, Craig, this is one of those races where you can really make a case for almost everybody in this field. There's something to recommend about most of these horses, and trips and pace are going to be of utmost importance for a lot of these runners. So let's take a look at the Time Form US pace projector, because there is some speed in this race. You see the number 10 Blowout shown on the early lead. She really does just have one way to go. They like to center to the front, try to open up early, and we'll see how fast she has to go to clear some runners too who are inside, including the number 2 Smooth Like Straight, Craig, another one who always likes to be forwardly placed.
Yeah, and it's another race where the Euros, we don't have information, so you kind of got to read through the comments. The one qualm I would have about this pace projector is I suspect the 2 will be right there with the 10. Smooth Like Straight is a horse who's always either on the lead or never more than a length behind, really. So I suspect he will be putting a little more pressure on than what we indicate.
Let's talk a little bit more about both of those pace horses. Let's begin with the number 10 Blowout, who is the one that's shown on the lead in that pace projector. And, Craig, she's coming into this race in great form. I love what the Chad Brown barn has done with her this year, just really committing her to being that front-running type. She ran off in the lead in the Distaff Turf Mile, perhaps going a little bit too fast up front, but they were able to get her back in her last couple of starts. Not quite as good as some top male horses in the 4-star Dave, but she did get that victory last time in the First Lady.
Yeah, I think she's a solid mare in here. She deserves the shot. I'm not a fan of her, even though we do show her on a lone lead, because she just hasn't really run the type of speed figures that it's going to take to win the Breeders' Cup Mile. And it's hard to imagine her getting a much easier trip than she would have last time in that First Lady, where she was basically all alone the whole way, got challenged briefly in the stretch, and was able to repulse her stablemate Regal Glory. But I think this is just a little bit too tough of a task, but I do like that she's in here because it definitely is going to make sure the pace is honest.
Yeah, she's definitely tenacious, and she's a hard fighter. And I think that loss in the 4-star Day was the first time ever in her career that she had lost a race by more than a length. And I think that's a good transition into Smooth Like Straight, because in some ways, Smooth Like Straight, Craig, is the male version of Blowout. He's a really game horse. He's always trying to fight it out to the wire, and he likes to be forwardly placed.
Yeah, same thing. And that's why I wanted to highlight his past performances. I mean, you can see he's just always right up there. He's a horse who is not going to let her get away easy. He hasn't been in races with a particularly fast pace. I don't really think he's good enough to win. But from that inside draw in his forward position, I do think he's one you got to consider at the verticals, and what will probably be a double-digit price to hang on for one of the minor spots.
Let's take a look at the last race that Smooth Like Straight ran when he was in against Mo Forza and Hit the Road. And Craig, this is one where the early pace is shown as slow, but they did really pick up the pace around the far turn as another horse challenged Smooth Like Straight. And that allowed horses like Mo Forza and Hit the Road to get into the race late. Mo Forza, he just keeps winning, but what kind of trip is he going to pull here? Because I think he's gotten pretty good trips in his last couple starts.
Yeah, he always does seem to get a good trip. I think part of that is unfortunately because he's been in a lot of small fields. He hasn't had to beat a lot of horses, and he's certainly not going to get that luxury here as we got a full field of 14. I'm not sure what he's going to work out. That was a really tough race to make a speed figure for. There was a similar race on the day earlier in the card where a 3-year-old actually ran a little bit faster than the City of Hope with similar fractions. That horse Subjective, he did come back to win a stakes race on Sunday, but I have my doubts about Mo Forza. He's a good, solid horse, but I think this is a much bigger step up in competition than a lot of people might think.
It does feel like he's going to be the shortest price of the American trained horses in here. So maybe if you want to do some price shopping, he's not the one for you, but he definitely is a contender in this race. Another American based horse that could attract some support in here is the winner of the Keeneland Turf Mile. Let's take a look at that race, as In Love, Craig, has really come to hand late in the season for trainer Paulo Lobo. He won this race last year with Ivar, who was also in this race, but In Love just runs right past a stablemate and on to a clear victory here.
Yeah, it was impressive performance. He was double-digit odds that day. I wouldn't say he got a great trip. He was pretty wide on the turn. He was inside early on, but he was able to maneuver. He showed he's got some versatility. He's tactical. He's able to maneuver in some traffic. And he ran a good, solid race. My one negative about him is, despite that string of 3 wins in a row, his best race is still only a 120 Timeform US speed figure, that coming in that Keeneland Turf Mile. So I do believe he's got to take another step forward. He's a 5-year-old, so it's kind of iffy proposition. He's 8-1. I can see maybe some people like him, but to me, he's got some room to go to be able to compete with some of the top Euros that we're going to get to.
Yeah, when I initially watched that race, I was getting really excited about In Love because he was so visually impressive. But as you were saying, he got a very good trip and ride from Alex Richard. And, he was 12-1 in that race, so he was a long shot winner. But when you go through that field, it really wasn't of the caliber of horse that he's going to face in this Breeders' Cup Mile. There was a heavy favorite in there, Order of Australia, actually the winner of the Breeders' Cup last year. And he was just a complete no-show. And I think that made it a much softer field, which is why he got that lower 120 Timeform US speed figure. He's got to really step up. And also, those Keeneland and Kentucky Downs turf courses, they tend to play a little bit different than Del Mar. So I think there are some questions for In Love to answer. And you also highlighted Ivar here, Craig. He's done no favors by the post-position draw, being all the way out in number 14. But he did run a big race in the Breeders' Cup last year. It's just been an unconventional 2-race 2021 campaign.
Yeah, he had some trouble in this race last year, and then he's obviously had some problems. He ran in the Turf Classic on Derby Day. He had no pace to run into. He ran in that Keeneland Turf Mile, and I think he had a bit of a troubled trip. So out of this Lobo uncoupled entry, I would probably prefer Ivar, but I just really worry. He had no luck once again with the post draw. He drew, I think it was the 10 last year. He draws the 14 this year. So good luck. He just seems to be a hard luck horse to me.
A horse that I always have a tough time getting a handle on is the number 4 Raging Bull. And Craig, let's take a look at his victory from earlier this spring in the Maker's Mark Mile. And I think you'll agree with me. If Raging Bull shows up with this race, he's got a big shot to win here.
Yeah, he does. I just have to wonder, where has that race been? Because he's had some chances. I wasn't happy with his performance in the Woodbine Mile. Admittedly, he didn't have a great pace scenario that day, but I suspect the field wasn't as good as what he's facing here. But I can't blame you for thinking he's got a big shot, because that Maker's Mark left an impression. At the time, I thought he was going to go on the bigger and better things. It hasn't really worked out, but any kind of return to that form we saw back in April, and he would be a major player.
Yeah, I guess the one thing that gives me some hope about Raging Bull is that he's disappointed before and he's bounced back with big efforts. It's just a little bit hard to predict when he's going to show up with those big performances. But that 124 Timeform US speed figure that he ran in that Maker's Mark makes him a major player here. And it's not like that's some outlier in his past performances. He's done that before. And I even thought he was best when he lost the poker next time out to Alexandra. He kind of got stymied inside in that race and again made an early move into a fast pace. Look, he didn't run great in the 4-star Dave and the Woodbine Mile. I'm not sure why they brought him back to Woodbine, because he's tried that race before and he never runs that well there. So I wasn't shocked by that performance. But I do think getting back to California and a really hard turf course might suit Raging Bull, because Chad's shipped him to California twice in the past, and he's won both of those races, including a really impressive victory in the Shoemaker Mile at Santa Anita a couple of years ago. So I think that there are some signs pointing to Raging Bull maybe showing up in this race, but he's going to have to show up. up because this is a really tough field. Another horse, Craig, that I do want to get your take on is the number 13, Casa Creed. Maybe I'm crazy for giving him a look in this race because he doesn't have a great post position and he did earn his biggest victory this year sprinting, but I can make some subtle excuses for his last 2 races.
Yeah, you can make some excuses for sure. My issue with him is he just hasn't really run that fast. He got a nice figure when he ran in the tropical turf, a second behind Ride a Comet, but that race hasn't really proven very strong. So I'm a bit against him here. I see why you like him. His trips haven't been great the last couple times. I just wonder if he's really good enough, and the 13 post kind of steered me away from him.
Yeah, maybe Casa Creed's just a better sprinter. He was visually impressive in that Jaipur victory. But the last couple times, the 4-star Dave, he was wide around both turns, and he only lost that race by 2 lengths. And then last time out in that Kentucky Downs race that was won by Gear Jockey, that turf sprint was just dominated towards the front end. And Casa Creed was the last to the top of the stretch and actually was making up good ground late. Again, maybe a mile is stretching him a little bit, but he's another horse that's going to be a big price in this race. And I think his form might be a little bit better than it seems. Those are the American horses, but Craig, we do have to get into the European contenders because there are some legitimate ones in this race, including the morning line favorite, who is Space Blues. And let's take a look at his last victory in the Prix de la Ferrette at Longchamp. This is as visually impressive a performance as you're going to see.
Yeah, this was really good. I think it was the last race run that day on the ARC day. And I kind of stuck around not that I was there, but I mean, I stuck around on the broadcast and watched all the races because I knew that some horses usually come out of this race and point towards the Breeders' Cup. And he blew me away, just as he blew this field away. He just had an incredible turn of foot to the wire. I've got no real knocks on him. He's really come to hand this year. I guess the one question would be, he's never been a mile. He's been 6 furlongs. He's been 7 furlongs the last 3 times out. So the 7 furlongs was around the turn last time, if I remember right. But this is 2 turns, so he's never faced that before as well. So there are some question marks for a short price, but I do think he's the horse to beat.
Yeah, it's a little interesting that they never tried him going a mile in Europe because he seems to have so much ability, and they've generally targeted those middle races, 6 and 7 furlongs. Sometimes some of those are at a bit of a lesser level. So we'll see how he handles this top level mile test in the Breeders' Cup mile. But I know that the stable is very high, and I saw an interview with Charlie Appleby this week where somebody asked him what's his best hope for this entire week at the Breeders' Cup, and he said Space Blues is his most likely winner. So that's a vote of confidence from a trainer who definitely knows how to win in the United States. So Space Blues definitely a major contender in this race, but he's going to need some pace because, as you saw in that replay, and as Craig was getting at, he's got that big late turn of foot, but he's going to have to wind up from a long way out and make that big run. Another horse that I know you're interested in, Craig, is the other Charlie Appleby Godolphin runner, Master of the Seas. He's a 3-year-old that's stepping up to face older horses here, but he does have some nice form from earlier in the season.
Yeah, maybe I'll be wearing the dunce cap after, given what Charlie Appleby said about the race. But it's a case where I prefer his other horse. And sometimes that happens where they'll get overlooked in these spots. I really liked his form back in the spring. He was running well. He ran a big race at Newmarket when he got that 119 time form rating. And then something went amiss. He came back, he ran okay again at Newmarket, and then he jumped way up in class on Champions Day a couple weeks ago. Didn't particularly run very well, but that was over a yielding course. And what I really like in here is he draws that good inside post position. He's shown some tactical speed in his races, and he's just one I think that is going to outrun his odds. Whether it's good enough to win the race, I'm not sure, but I'm going to take a shot with him getting a good trip from that inside draw and getting the jump on his stablemate and some others.
I definitely gave him a long look here. That race in the 2,000 guineas earlier in the year against Poetic Flare, that was a really solid effort. And if he had continued developing after that and had a consistent summer campaign, maybe he'd be running the kind of speed figures that Space Blues is right now. But I don't think we really saw how he could develop because he had that setback. And I agree, he had an excuse last time in that QE2. So we'll see if he can bounce back here on firm going. I think there are some things to recommend at Master of the Seas. And the one other European horse that we're going to mention is Mother Earth for Aidan O'Brien. Obviously, Aidan O'Brien swept the trifecta in this race last year, so hard to top that achievement. But Mother Earth, definitely an interesting horse coming into this race. She's had no shortage of races on her resume this season.
No, she is a warrior for sure. As a matter of fact, I kind of had to piece together a couple graphics to get all the way back to her juvenile filly turf effort last year. And she's run really well this year. I mean, you can see she's running nothing but Group 1s overseas. She was able to notch one of them at Deauville in France, run really consistent time form ratings. And I just think it would be unwise to overlook her in this spot, given Aidan O'Brien's success last year. I don't think he's putting her in here lately. She's obviously a tough filly for a 3-year-old. She's going to get a little bit of a weight break. And with the right trip, I think she could be right there at the wire.
Yeah, she's obviously a really admirable horse, a hard knocker. I think some of those restricted female races in Europe going the mile are usually of a lesser quality than the open ones. So we'll see if she can step up against tougher company here. But she's definitely an easy horse to root for, always hitting the board in those many starts that she's made this year. Craig, let's throw up our picks for this race. We landed on somewhat different pages. You went more the European route. I leaned a little bit more towards the Americans. I was looking up stats for the recent Breeders' Cups in California. And when you look over the last decade, there have been 6 Breeders' Cups that took place in Southern California. And out of those 6 Breeders' Cups at Del Mar and Santa Anita, Americans have won 5 of them. The Europeans have really done well in the Kentucky Breeders' Cups, but the Del Mar and Santa Anita Breeders' Cups have really been dominated by the American horses. So that makes me a little bit wary of the Euros here. But I think that the 2 that you put on top are the most dangerous ones.
Yeah, I was mostly concerned about. I mean, I know about the same stat you did, that the Euros haven't done as well in Southern California, but I just haven't been impressed with our milers this year. They haven't run speed figures like it usually takes to win this kind of race. Usually it's going to take in the upper 120. So that's why I relied on the Euros. I went for more of a price and master of the seas. I do think Space Blues is the real deal in a grade 1 horse. I just do question that 1 mile and the tight turns here, which he's never done the 2 turns. So Mother Earth in third, but I'm looking for a score with Master of the Seas.
Yeah, as you can see, I've got a ton of respect for Space Blues. I put him second in my picks, surrounded by some American horses, just doing some price shopping in a race that I think is wide open. So I'm putting Raging Bull on top. Like I was saying before, I don't totally trust him, but I do think he's a horse that can win this race with his best effort. And I think from post 4, he projects to work out a very good ground-sniffing trip under Irad Ortiz. Casa Creed, another horse that's going to be value that I tried to put in there, along with the number 2 Smooth Like Straight, another one that I think might get a good trip. But many ways to go in this Breeders' Cup Mile. Again, one of the most wide open races on that Breeders' Cup Saturday card. Good luck if you're playing this weekend.